The Detroit Pistons dominate the Utah Jazz. There were some things we could learn from this tonight, though. A few things about the Pistons and some interesting things about the Utah Jazz. Let's talk about this Hoops Nerd postgame show. All right, guys, so that was a tough loss for the Utah Jazz, an impressive win for the Pistons. Well, not super impressive. Utah was not interested in winning, but I'll be honest, Utah has not been dominated like this many times. So for Pistons fans who think this Jazz team, it's just an easy win. To be honest, Utah almost won their game yesterday against the Pelicans, and they rested most of their players. Utah has been in a lot of close games, and so we have just not seen the Utah Jazz get blown out very often this year. So for them to just be completely dominated for basically start to finish. I mean, Utah made a few small runs, but it was mostly because the Pistons were just kind of letting their foot off the gas a little bit. But Utah got dominated start to finish, and you got to give credit to the Detroit Pistons. They are playing incredible. Their last 10, they are 9-1, and really coming together. They have found a good coach in Bickerstaff, and they have just, Cade Cunningham has become an absolute lock for the All-Star team for a long time for them, and All-NBA likely. I mean, he's playing at such an elite level. And now Detroit sits at, on the Tankathons, obviously they're the 10th best record in the NBA. They have really come a long way from where they were before, and it really just goes to show, and I have a theory about some of this, and I'm going to share that theory, and maybe we'll call it the Detroit Pistons theory. But before these last 3 seasons with the Detroit Pistons, they were picking at like 7. They were not completely tanking. They were trying to win games, and they'd end up picking kind of where the Jazz did the last 2 seasons. But these last 3, they end up getting 3 top 5 picks 3 years in a row. They hit on some other picks, someone like Jalen Duren, and they fill their team with other solid role players after having got those 3 top 3 picks. And now they're winning. They get the number 1 overall pick in Cade Cunningham. They get the number 5 pick in Jaden Ivey, and they get the number 5 pick in Ausar Thompson. And man, once Ausar Thompson came back, and as he has just gotten more and more comfortable, this team just keeps winning. Like I said, they're like arguably the hottest team in the NBA right now, 9-1 in their last 10. And there's a reason they crushed Utah. Utah wasn't interested in winning this one, and Detroit is good. Ausar Thompson, like I mentioned, number 5 pick last year, or the year before last. 7 for 7 from the field, 3 for 3, and I could be wrong. Guys, let me know in the comments, but I know they always pick number 5. Anyways, 17 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, 1 block. All I wanted on the Jazz was one of the Thompson twins. That's all I wanted. And they go to the Pistons, they go to the Rockets, and they're playing incredible. Just such transcendent athleticism. They do everything well. Amen is doing incredible for Houston. Ausar is doing incredible for the Pistons. I'm just jealous, man. This is what I wanted for the Utah Jazz. Had the Utah Jazz learned anything the last 2, at least the Utah Jazz learned this year that you can't go halfway into something, right? It's scriptural. You can't have a foot in Babylon and a foot in Zion. You can't have a foot in tanking and a foot in trying to win. Just pick one. Pick one. And in reality, if you want to actually go for a championship, you've got to go through the sacrifice that the Detroit Pistons went through, that the Houston Rockets went through. You can't do it otherwise. And the Pistons and Rockets showed us. And what's funny, and I was tweeting out, people who said, oh, you could end up like the Detroit Pistons a year ago. Like, there were so many people online that tweeted at me, oh, you could be like the Detroit Pistons. Oh, if you lose a lot of these games, you might end up like the Detroit Pistons. Well, you know what? Certainly seems pretty nice right now to be a Detroit Pistons fan, right? That's the irony of everything. Utah, who finally decided to do the right thing, is not on an upward trajectory. They're on a downward one. Had Utah done what Detroit did, and Detroit didn't even do it on purpose, but it still was a proof of concept that if you get like a top 5 pick at least 2 to 3 years in a row, that is good enough to rebuild with. But you can't do it otherwise. If you consistently don't, then you will consistently be in the middle of the league. So if you want to be the Sacramento Kings, the Chicago Bulls, the Indiana Pacers, teams like that, you will always be in the middle because you will never be bad enough to get the top talent in the league that will take you to the top, like the Cade Cunninghams, nor will you ever be good enough to win anything come playoff time. You may have a first-round win, maybe, kind of like Utah did, maybe. But that's the ceiling and that's the floor. You have to make a decision in the NBA. You just have to. There's no question about it. If you want to be a championship team, you have to have all NBA caliber talent. You know, it's just not very complicated. And we're seeing what this team is doing. And by the way, they don't even have Jaden Ivey playing right now. Jaden Ivey's hurt, and he was looking awesome to begin the year. What if they had Jaden Ivey still? They'd be even better. Even better. And so for everyone last year, and I'm sure there's comments in the YouTube, I could search them, but I'm not going to be mean to my YouTube followers because I love every single one of you. But everyone who said, oh, we might end up like the Detroit Pistons, well, I hope you watched tonight. But you know what? Likely is all those people that hate tanking and all these things weren't watching tonight. They weren't watching the fruits of what has come to pass in Detroit. And what's going on. And by the way, they're going to be good for at least the next 5 years. At least. Sustained winning will now happen. But you can't get there if you don't bottom out. You can't. And it's why I hope that Utah does this for 2 years in a row. Go completely young. Do it. And you will bear fruit. By their fruits ye shall know them. Okay? Okay? I mean, if tonight was not a clearer, more obvious lesson on the importance of top-tier talent from the top of the draft and how necessary it is to get multiple picks from the top of the draft, I don't know what else to say. I don't know how else to explain this. So the contrast was there. Asar, incredible, perfect from the field. Jalen Duren, perfect from the field, 16 points, 12 rebounds. Cade Cunningham, unbelievable how good he is. And he was a number 1 overall pick. Sure would love to have one of those in Utah. 29 points, 9 assists, 4 steals. He's awesome. He's just so in control. He's not even the most explosive athlete. He's just big, strong, crafty, incredible skill level, super smart, super competitive. Awesome. And honestly, this Pistons team is fun to watch. And they're only going to get better. They've got a good coach. They finally have a front office making some good picks and choices. They have a terrible owner, but even despite the terrible owner, the terrible coaching they've had, they got the top tier talent. This is what it's about, guys. This is the example right here. They didn't even win the last 2 seasons. They got 2 top 5 picks. That's all it took. Yes, they got lucky with the number 1. So if Utah can get lucky and win the number 1 in this draft and get Cooper Flagg, they still need to get that top tier talent. You can't skip steps. You can't. And the other thing, and I don't know if we need to go through, because, just some quick notes. Cody Williams had a few moments. He had a nice left-handed layup. Kyle Filipowski shot 4 for 7 from 3. 25 points. He scored more than anybody. Impressive. Walker Kessler, 14 and 9. Decent night, but wasn't impacting the game in a huge way. And then Collier had one of his lowest assist totals we've seen in a while. So we're going to probably see a little bit of come to earth with us, Isaiah Collier, maybe, as they play lesser players. And then Keontae George, he hit some threes, 12 point. It was just, but that's like the best. There's not a lot to say tonight. It was a bad night. And I will say in the Jazz defense, it was like the 3rd game in 4 nights, back end of a back-to-back. They were resting their best players because Utah understands the assignment very clearly. You want a Cunningham on your team, you have to do it. You have to earn it. You can't just bet on luck. You can't just play the slot machines and expect to become a millionaire. You got to do the work, right? You've got to go through the sacrifice. And Utah's doing it. But the other thing that this Detroit Pistons team is teaching this Jazz team, outside of just the importance of those top picks, but you have to have defensive players and strong wings that can defend. Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren protecting the rim. They are filling their team with defensive talent. Utah has not been doing that. And it is the hardest thing, one of the hardest archetypes to get in the NBA is the two-way wing. It's the hardest archetype to find. They just do not come to your team unless you are getting a top 3 to 5 pick. And usually it's got to be top 2 or 3 because it's like top tier quarterbacks in the NFL. If you want to draft a top tier quarterback in the NFL, well, you better have a bottom 3 record. And in a lot of cases, you better have bottom 1 or 2. It's just the case. And the same goes for the NBA. You want a two-way top tier 6'8" to 6'10" wing. That's what you need on your team to win. And you don't get them unless you win the lottery. That's it. And you only win the lottery. Yes, some teams have won the lottery with higher picks. Like the Atlanta Hawks last year got extremely lucky. It's not common, though. And to get to the top, you've got to have the best odds possible. And Utah's finally doing it. So Utah finally has a legit shot at Cooper Flagg and a 6'8" to 6'10" two-way wing that plays elite at both ends of the floor. If the Jazz win the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes, it changes everything. It really does. And you can't stop there. You've got to get... It's like the clip from Ocean's 11 when George Clooney's talking to Brad Pitt and he says, should we get one more? Do you think we need one more? And Brad Pitt's just sullenly on the bar looking to the side, thinking about A.J. DeBonsa or Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer. And George Clooney realizes, yes, we need one more. If you want sustained championship caliber winning, you've got to have at least one. You have to have one. But if you have two, that's where things change. And considering how good the draft is next year, how good it is, you have to go for it. You have to. If Utah gets 2 top 3 picks 2 years in a row, boom, it's done. And it's why, honestly, I'm starting to really get into the camp of drafting Ace Bailey number 2. If Utah wins number 2, I'm drafting Ace Bailey. Why? Because I would like a 6'8" to 6'10" wing that can play both ends of the floor, offense and defense. And that's the thing that Utah has to do. Utah has to get more defensive talent. Who on this KJ Martin, you could argue, is solid defensively. Walker Kessler, good defensive center. And maybe tonight's not the best night for this because it's third game in 4 nights. But Colin Sexton is the worst defender in the NBA, according to Basketball Reference and D. LeBron. And it shows. These last 3 years where Colin Sexton has been putting up big numbers has also coincided with Utah having the worst defense in the NBA. He's a big part of that. Johnny Juzang, terrible defender. I'm not sure Johnny Juzang is a winning NBA player. He's maybe someone that can be on the end of the bench for an NBA team, maybe. But if you're putting him on the floor for big minutes, I think we're learning that he's just not playing that well defensively. And offensively, there's just a disconnect there. But 2 for 7 from 3 is not good enough. Isaiah Collier had a few moments tonight, but we still got to see him improve. He has to improve too. Keontae George got benched because of defense. Will Hardy's trying to find it wherever he can. And Keontae George is playing pretty darn well off the bench as an offensive player, but Key's got to get better defensively, but Isaiah Collier does too. But, Utah right now as a team is basically just saying, I hope these guys develop. I hope these guys develop as defenders. That's what we're hoping. We're hoping. Utah needs to draft defenders. It's why they drafted Taylor Hendricks. Two-way, long, 6'8" to 6'10" wing forward, big. It's could it be more obvious what Utah wants to do? That injury sucked more than any injury. I mean, that was the worst. And so we get to see him next year, but it's going to be interesting. And, it's why I am just pro going completely young next year. I don't want to draft anyone or have anyone on the floor anymore from here on out that we didn't draft with a defense first focus. It's why they drafted Cody Williams. He has some real defensive potential. He's struggled this year. It's going to take some development time for him, obviously, if it works at all. And if it doesn't work, whatever. Utah has so many different picks coming in that they're going to have a lot of these players that they're going to be able to try and develop. But these next two picks for Utah, they have to be players that could be potential two-way players. I really like Dylan Harper. I'm not sure if he is a defensive prospect. Offensively, I think he's going to be incredible. But Utah's had good offenses these last 3 seasons. Their defense has been what's killed them. You have to get two-way players. And if you're at the top of the draft, you have to draft them. They have to be two-way defensive wings. I don't know how else. This is probably just getting pretty repetitive, but it's what you have to do. Utah needs Taylor Hendricks to come back next year. You could argue he's the most important prospect on the team based off of what Utah wants and needs to do. Kind of scary because I don't know if, I think Keontae George has incredible offensive upside. I love the passing from Collier, and I think Collier is showing that he could be a good defender. I love the defense. I love Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler's really proven some things to me. But in my opinion, the players you really just have to hold on to are these young players and see if they can. Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, Taylor Hendricks, Walker Kessler. But that's kind of, I think that Kyle Filipowski has some potential there too, maybe as a 4, but we'll see. But Utah still does not have their cornerstone. They don't have it. They don't have it. If you think it's Lauri Markkanen, I got something to tell you. You can go look at D. LeBron. He is bottom 10 defender in the NBA. And if you want to win a championship, you've got to build on two-way wings. Yeah, he's 7 feet tall. Yeah, he can shoot threes. Utah needs to defend. They can't defend anything or anyone. And that changes with drafting players. It's just a fact. It's a reality. And if you're here listening to this, I love you because you are one of the hardcore Jazz fans. Truly. Truly. And what we're here at is we're at just the core and essence of team building and what this Utah Jazz team needs to do. We're at the bottom. But being at the bottom is good. It's good. We have never been here, guys. We have not been here. This is like the first time in Utah Jazz history that they are bottoming out to the bottom of the league. Truly. It's just not happened before, at least on purpose. And now they have a chance to go for a transformational player in Cooper Flagg, and you build from the bottom up. But Utah needs to build the right way, build gradually. If Utah drafts Cooper Flagg and they just decide that they want to win now with Cooper Flagg and Lauri Markkanen, even though they're on completely different timelines, yes, they will win some games next year, but you will not win as many as you think. You just won't. Cooper Flagg is going to take time to figure things out. It's going to be a year or two until he gets there. You look at Cade Cunningham. It took him 2 or 3 seasons. He also had a season-ending injury last year. It took him time. He's in like year 4, and now he's an all-star. Now he's figuring it out. If you have to wait 2 or 3 years for Cooper Flagg to really get there, you're already at the end of this contract for Lauri Markkanen. You're looking at a 29, 30-year-old player. Utah has to do this right. Build from the bottom up. Get your team filled with 2 or 3 players at the bottom of the draft, and then go. And then that's when those other picks may end up leapfrogging. So maybe in like 2 years, the Minnesota Timberwolves go through crazy turmoil, and those picks pan out. And that's when you add crazy talent to an already good roster. But Utah has to win this. They have to win this lottery. And if we don't, it sucks. But they will still get a bottom 5 or bottom 6 pick. It's what they have to do. and then they have to do it again next year. Winning Cooper Flag or not, you have to go completely young. You need to go next year. Your lineup needs to be basically Cooper Flag, oh gosh, careful there. Cooper Flag, Taylor Hendricks, Walker Kessler, and then whoever they get from the Minnesota Timberwolves. You've got to have Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, and that's what you've got to do. And you've got to build with that core and build up. And then guess what? If you win the next year, if you get like a Darren Peterson or in my opinion, AJ DeBonsa's who I would pick. I don't care. Because why? Because he's a big, tall, two-way wing who cares on defense, plays his heart out defensively, can play multiple positions defensively, just like Cooper Flag. And then all of a sudden, Utah is on the way. And that is when you go for trades. That is when you decide if you want to use your picks to go get another player. Then you go. But it is just not the right move for Utah to go too fast. What we saw tonight is that Utah has some flawed players. Even the young players they have. I love these young players. They're great. But Utah just does not have a cornerstone superstar yet. They just don't. Read the Ringer, guys. Go read the Ringer Top 100. Lauri Markkanen comes in at 48. And yes, some of that is because he's not been playing this year, but it is without a doubt having a bad year this year. And I don't want to hear that he's trying new things and trying new shots and whatever, because he's still missing the three-point shots he's taking. He is having a career low three-point shooting year. It's been bad. And I don't know if he's injured or what. But this is just not it, okay? It's just not it. And Utah has to just go and do this right. All these teams that got those bottom, like look at the Houston Rockets. Everyone said, oh, I'd hate to beat the Houston Rockets. I'd hate to be the Houston Rockets. Well, they got Amen Thompson at 4. They have Jalen Green. They hit on Alperen Şengün, which is great. But it certainly looks like Amen Thompson is that cornerstone piece for them. And we could have had him. We could have had him. You right now, if you're a Jazz fan, I honestly would be a little frustrated if you're like me and wanted to tank completely, wanted to bottom out. Last 2 seasons, Stephon Castle, you guys know what I said about Stephon Castle last season, all last season. It was so obvious, and now in the redraft, it's looking like he's the number 1 pick, and he's going to win Rookie of the Year. If Utah did this right, this might have been the last year you needed to tank. If they'd have just done the right thing before, Utah would have someone like Amen Thompson on their team. They'd have Stephon Castle with him. They'd have Cooper Flag. And then on top of that, they'd have their other players. They would have Walker Kessler with Amen Thompson. And guess what? That team would struggle to shoot, but they would absolutely defend at a top tier level. And then guess what? You go out and you trade for shooting. You go make those trades at that point. It's just, I'm happy that the Utah Jazz are doing it the right thing finally. They have dragged this out way too long. They finally did the right thing. They're finally bottoming out. They should have done it the last 3 years, but at this point, they need to do it right, and they need to start this year and next year, and then they will be in such good shape. Guys, it is so obvious how good they can become if they just bottom out this year, bottom out next year, and then go, and then make your trades, and then trade for that player that's frustrated, or go get someone like a Devin Booker, whatever. Go out and make those trades 2 years from now, because these next 2 years is youth development and bottoming out, because we're going for superstars. Imagine how fun Summer League is going to be this year if the Jazz win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Imagine how fun Summer League will be next year if the Jazz bring in Cooper Flag with AJ DeBonsa or someone along those lines. Darren Peterson. Are you kidding me? This Jazz team becomes exciting so fast. And yes, this season hasn't been very fun, but it was a long time coming, and we finally ripped off the Band-Aid and said, this is what we need to do. Thank you to Danny Ainge. And I know I give Ryan Smith a lot of guff, but I got to give him some credit for some things. You got to give him credit for getting Danny Ainge, because I don't know if Danny Ainge comes here without Ryan Smith. I don't know. Maybe, but I doubt it. And you got to give him credit for finally allowing Danny Ainge to do this year. Something tells me, and I have a pretty good educated opinion, that these last 2 years probably would have been different if Danny Ainge was calling things the way he wanted to. We would have probably bottomed out much sooner. But instead, we had another voice telling us that we can win and we can do these things. Well, I'm pretty sure I know who that is. And so shout out to Ryan Smith for finally letting Danny Ainge do what he wants to do this year and what the Jazz should do. And I hope that Ryan Smith does it next year and that they have to do it. They can do this same thing next year. It's what has to happen. It's just the reality. All right, guys, that's it. We learned a lesson today. I hope everyone did. Let's do our draft tonight. Let's see. Let's pull this up. And let's see what would happen. Utah has solidified their position. So we're going to refresh this. And Utah sits now in number 3, 2 games up on New Orleans, which is great because the next 3 games are against really bad teams. They are important losses coming up for the Utah Jazz. So let's see what would happen. By the way, look, Minnesota drops again as Sacramento has now jumped into the playoff picture. Yeah, baby. So Minnesota sits in the lottery with Utah. More lottery balls for Utah. This is fantastic. All right, let's see. What would happen if the lottery was today? Another win for Cooper Flagg. That's 3 out of the last 4 tries. Utah wins the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. Comes away also with Nolan Traore. Are you serial? That means they also have a shot at Yegor Demon, Hugo Gonzalez, Colin Murray-Boyles, who looks freaking awesome. In fact, look at that. Tall, long, athletic players. Let's go get them. Let's go get Colin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. Bring him to the Utah Jazz. Guys, another successful Cooper Flagg draw. All right, let's give a shout out to our All-Stars tonight. Thank you so much to all the All-Stars supporting this channel. Let's give a shout out to Christian House Money to Haas. Wait, I gotta refresh this. I gotta make sure we're right here. Come right, come correct. All right, let's give a shout out to Christian House Money to Haas. Cam Bam, thank you, ma'am. Ryan Everett Perry, the legend. I believe in Steve Jazz Exile. Baby Elliott Madsen, See Ya Alexa Later, Jordan the Goat Best Roll, Austin R. Grant Editor Extraordinaire, KG10 to TH5, and Patrick Akubo, the Connoisseur. And oh, by the way, KG10, the OG. Guys, that's all I got tonight. It's important that Utah keeps on the right track. It's not the most fun at times, but certainly going to pay off in the end. Like and subscribe to the channel.